Hello, my name is Aaron with iBoard Repair and iPhone Data Recovery, and today I'm going to be working on an iPhone XS, it looks like. XS or X? Yeah, this is XS. As always, I haven't done very much to the phone yet. I've only taken off the screen and unplugged some of the connectors. But I have already noticed something pretty odd on this one. So this one came in as a water damaged phone. However, I'm seeing very little corrosion. I'm seeing just a little bit around the cameras here, but the board itself looks perfectly clean. Having said that, I suspect that this one has some power rail that's short. I don't think it's the main rail because as I always do for my first step, I take my DC power supply here and I connect the probes to the battery connector here. And I don't get any prompt to boot before, or any amp draw before I prompt to boot, I should say, which means there's no mainline short. But when I prompt it to boot, I also don't get anything. Every once in a while, I'll flash something small like that, but for the most part, I get nothing. And usually what that indicates to me is that a CPU power rail is normally short when this is the case. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this board out of the housing. And then I'm going to split the board and we're going to see if we can find a shorted power rail because that's what I expect to find. So give me a moment while I pull this board out and then we can get right, we can move right ahead with it. Alright, so I have the board out of the housing here. And I'll go ahead and prompt it to boot one more time just to make sure it wasn't any of those cables that I still potentially had connected that was causing the problem. I don't think that will be the case, but it's smart just to check. So I'll do the same thing. I'll take my probes, I'll put it at the battery connector, and I'll prompt this to boot. Let me double check where the power button line is on this one. Oh, I'm working. I have the wrong board pulled up here. That's the X. That's the X, and I'm working on the XS. And still nothing when I prompt to boot. Okay, so I'll definitely split these boards and see if I can find a shorted power rail on the inside. I'm almost positive that's what I'm going to find is a shorted power rail somewhere. Very few other reasons why I would get like that 0 amp draw when I prompt it to boot. So I'll turn this on. The seating platform takes about 4 minutes, so I'll pause the video for that time, and then I'll be back with you once it's ready to pull up. First, I'm going to put the timer on my phone. Okay. Okay, it's been about 3.5 minutes. I've realized a couple of things while I was waiting. One of the things I realized is that I forgot to remove the tape right here. Meaning when I pull this up, I might mess up some of the solder balls, which isn't that big of a deal. I just prefer not to. Also, the other thing is I should have checked to see if any of these capacitors are short. I did look to see if there was corrosion, and I didn't see any corrosion. But still, it would have been smart to measure those because those are very common capacitors to become shorted during water damage. Anyways, now this thing should be ready to pull up, so I'll pull it up and see what we can find. So I only dropped that because of that tape that was holding on. Otherwise, that would have been an easy pull. Anyways, like I mentioned, it doesn't really matter. And I don't think I messed up any of the solder balls anyway. So very first thing I'm going to do now is, now that I have this board disconnected, I can see if the top board is booting now, because it's possible that the problem was down here on the bottom board. And if that was the case, then that's now cleared because the bottom board is no longer attached. I want to look at this little area because it looks a little discolored. No, it's fine. So I'm still not seeing any water damage anywhere. So I'm really hoping I don't have like a RAM short or something like that. Let's see what we can find. The 0 amp draw can also be from a few other things besides a missing power or a shorted power rail. For example, if the boost circuit was not working, I believe that would also give me 0 amp draw. This was the tape I forgot to pull off. I almost always remember to pull that off, I just forgot this time. Okay, so let's see if it's still behaving the same with the bottom board gone. The top board will boot completely by itself on the excess, so I should see something on this DC power supply if the bottom board was the problem. I've already forgotten which was the power button line, so let me double check that. And still nothing. So let's just start checking power rails one by one now. Again, I'm going to check these ones by NAND, and I wish I would have checked that earlier. If it does happen to be one of these caps, I'll be just a little upset that I did extra work for no reason. And of course, it's short. Look at that, it's short. Oh man, I'm almost sure that I will have pulled this for no reason then. Because I bet you we're gonna find a short on the top of this board. I wonder if I can, if this was pulled well enough that I can just set it back down without reballing, so I can also save this phone. Probably. But okay, this guy, this line is short, and it's what I should have checked right at the beginning before I split this. I even realized that while I was heating it. Just because this is a common line to go bad. So that's a 2.63 voltage line. So we'll put our voltage underneath that value. Pretty much anything underneath that value will be fine. Then I'm going to freeze this board and we're going to apply some heat and we're going to see where that heat goes. And that should light up our bad component. And there it is, you see it? Is it in frame? Yeah, it's in frame. So the short's showing up right here. So this guy is my problem. So what this means is that I split this board for no reason because the short was on the top and it would have been easy to find this short if I would have just checked before I split this board. And I'll show you this this heat again just so you can see. You can keep an eye out in this area right here because that's where the short's going to show up. But I'll put my ground probe I guess right here. I'll heat this line, and yep, you see it heating up right away. Okay. I really wish I wouldn't have split this. Only because I'm already using my jig on another phone, and if I wasn't using my jig I can start to pull data on this right away once this is cleared, and now I won't be able to until that jig is complete or finished being used. So that component is just a little bit gray on one end, but honestly it does not look that bad, and I would never have suspected this guy was short. Broke my razor. This guy's on there tight. Usually when they're short, they're ready to come off pretty easy. Not this one. That wasn't the most elegant removal, but don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. And as long as I can get these pads, make sure they're not connected, then we should be fine. I scratched the top of the board a little bit, but it doesn't matter. Let's see if we're still short. Nope, no longer short. So now this should boot up completely, and just to show you the difference in the DC power amp draw, let me prompt it to boot again. So set it back to 4 volts because that's the battery voltage. Over here, prompt it to boot again, and now this time we should see some different reading on the DC power supply. So there we go, 0.07, and it's showing the normal beginning boot sequence. So this phone is going to be booting now. I guess I'm just going to reconnect it to the bottom board here. As long as everything looks good enough to me. And it does, it looks good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and reconnect this to the bottom board. And then I'll double check that it's booting after that. So I'll clean this up a little bit first. This customer really wanted this phone to work again when I'm done, which is why I'm gonna take these extra steps to get it working. But it would be a lot easier just to put this in the jig, but also, like I said, my jig's already being used, but I do have a computer free, so if I can just get this booting up without the jig, then I can start taking data from it today before I leave, which will be nice. I do have a little bit of a mess up right there on the pad. So that's just a ground pad, and it just has a little bit of the spacer sitting up. I'm just going to get rid of that spacer just so it doesn't cause me a problem. Let's see if there's anything else like that as well. No, the rest of it looks pretty good. So I think these pads are good enough. I'm not going to have to reball it. It should be okay to just put back together. And the only reason that's even a question was because I left that tape on, and then I dropped it because of that tape. I was afraid that some of the solder pads may have gotten messed up during that exchange, but I think it's going to be fine. Okay, that should be fine. That should be fine. So when the pads are not messed up, it's pretty easy to put these boards back together. I do still put a little bit of flux down, but not very much. Q-tip and move that around a little bit just to make sure it's even and to make sure there's not too much in one spot anywhere. Okay, and then I'll line it up a little bit. And this is nice because this heating platform lines it up for me to some extent, and I just kind of got to tweak it just a bit. But not very much usually. So that seems fine to me for the most part. So what I will do, I've used this technique for quite a long time now. Greg Wade is the one that first told me it's a good method to use. Basically, I will let it find its way the first time on its own, and then the second time I'll come through and I'll put a weight on top to make sure everything's pressed together. But initially, I'll just let it sit exactly like this with nothing on top of it for the same amount of time, the 4 minutes. I'll start that, and then I'll show you my next step after that 4 minutes. But I'll be right back. We don't need to wait together for that. I'll be back once the timer's up. Okay, I let it heat for a while, and I let it cool for a while, and now I just go and I put some weight on top of it. Not very much, but enough just so it can press down a little bit while it's heating a second time. Alright. So now the weight's on there, and I just heat it again for a second time. I'm going to do another 4 minutes. Maybe 3.5, because this one might still be a little bit hot. But I'll be back again after that, and we can show you the phone turning on. Okay, I let this heat up, and I've let it cool down. It's probably still just a little bit warm, but the solder should no longer be liquid. Still a little hot. Okay, I'm going to put this back into its original board and housing because, you know what, that screen may be bad. I'll put it back into the original housing and try a different screen. So I'm going to go grab a screen, be right back. All right. So there we go, we got an Apple logo. So I guess in essence, this video turned into me kind of just demonstrating how I take apart the sandwich and put it back together. There we go. We have access to the phone. The phone's working again. In this case, I'll most likely just take a backup of this, so I have a backup secured, and then I'll probably send her back a working phone if that's what she prefers. But this is it. That was quite an easy job. This phone should be perfectly fine to continue using now that that capacitor is taken care of, because nothing else on this board appeared to be water damage that I was able to see. So I will connect this to my free computer and I'll pull data from it. I appreciate you stopping by my channel and watching me diagnose this data recovery job. Hope you learned something and I hope you stop by again. Thanks. Bye-bye.